All right, before we dive into this episode, the Minimalists want to help you declutter your glowing screen. So head on over to theminimalists.com/wallpapers to download any of our free minimalist wallpapers, including our Love People, Use Things wallpaper for your smartphone or computer. Enjoy.
This podcast has bad words.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Minimalist Podcast, where we discuss what it means to live a meaningful life with less. My name is Joshua Fields Milburn. Ryan Nicodemus is out on vacation today, so I found another person named Ryan. And, Ryan Holiday is here. He's the author of the brand new book, Stillness is the Key. Ryan, thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Today, we're going to talk about stillness. We're going to talk about quietude. We're going to talk about combating distractions, and we're going to talk about slowing down with today's guest. And our first question is from Alex in North Dakota.
Hey guys, my name is Alex and I'm from Minot, North Dakota. I am graduating from college in about 6 months and ultimately plan to continue my education in a more meaningful way once I'm done. My goal essentially is to learn a new skill, either physically or intellectually, every 6 months or so. And I guess my main question for this would be, what are some of the most vital or salient skills, either physically or mentally, that someone living a more purpose-driven or intentional life should strive for?
So Ryan, skills. He wants to build up some skills, some new skills every 6 months. I think this is a meaningful pursuit. What advice do you have for Alex?
Yeah, I mean, I do like this idea. I think there is, the more you expose yourself to stuff that you don't know how to do, it's sort of naturally humbling, and it naturally kind of keeps you hungry. Like, it's very easy, you talk about sort of like having an intentional life, sort of shaping your life, but I try to do that too, but the downside is you can end up like only doing stuff you really like or only stuff you're really good at all the time. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because you eliminated all the stuff you don't like doing, which is great. Like, you don't like scheduling, okay, get an assistant. Maybe that's not something you need to be good at. But what you're doing is you're kind of like softening your life, because like you're never struggling, you're never challenged, you're never.
It's kind of like grad school versus kindergarten. Kindergarten, everything is like brand new and like everything is difficult, even though you're not really doing anything difficult, but because it's new, it is difficult. Whereas grad school, it's these incremental improvements, and I think there's something to be said for both. Yeah. But I think what you're telling Alex here is, put yourself in more sort of kindergarten-like situations where it's new to you. Yeah.
And I mean, look, this is easier to do, like, if you know what your main thing is. Like, it's like, okay, I'm a writer, and then I can go learn totally irrelevant skills that are challenging and interesting and make me better, but they're not really designed to help. They're like hobbies. Like, one of my favorite books is this book by Winston Churchill, and it's called Painting as a Pastime. So you wouldn't think that basically the leader of the free world would, this guy who's sort of probably the most ambitious man of his age, had an almost inhuman work schedule, and yet what he liked to do in his spare time was paint. Right. And he wrote this book about basically the power of hobbies. And he was saying that, like, the most important thing that like a public person or, a powerful person needs to do is, he says, you need to have one or two or maybe even three like really good hobbies. And so for Winston Churchill, the hobbies were painting, which he learns sort of right after the First World War. He basically bungled a bunch of stuff and he's sort of thrown out of public life, and he turns to painting. And then later he turns to bricklaying. He learns how to lay bricks. Really? He has this estate in the English countryside. And when he's writing this book, it's called The World Crisis, he spends most of that. He there's this awesome letter he writes, and he's like, I've been writing 2,000 words and laying 200 bricks a day. And so it was this idea of having something totally the opposite of his profession, that was rigorous and hard, but forced him very much outside of his comfort zone, and forced it, like, his daughter would help him lay the bricks, and he would have to go to a pretty place to paint to painting, right? And then even within painting, Churchill would talk about how he would try to get better at painting, right? So he'd go like, okay, I learned how to paint. He's like, now I want to go to a museum, really take everything in, and see if I can't repaint a painting that I saw the next day. Right? Or he'd say like, I want to try to paint something from memory. So even within painting, he would set out to like add skills to his sort of quiver. And so I just think maybe this isn't what the question is really about, but the idea of like, if you can find your main thing, and then you can be like, these are all these seemingly irrelevant side things, but are actually sort of giving you rest and giving you some sort of peace and quiet that help you be better at that main thing.
Well, we're going to be talking quite a bit about your new book today. This is sort of, I guess this completes a trilogy for you in a way,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the first two books, Ego is the enemy and Obstacle is the way, and this is Stillness is the key. I think one of the things you're talking about here, whether it's bricklaying or painting, it is reclaiming this sort of stillness.
Yeah, and I didn't mean to just like direct this question back to my book. It's just something I think about. Like, how do you like in my routine on a daily basis? It's like I basically work the first half of the day, and then the second half of the day I try to do like exercise, or I try to do something that's very much the opposite of my main thing, because it balances it out, but then it also gives me a way to sort like. I guess don't just think about it as like, oh, I'm acquiring skills. Think about it as like I'm acquiring balance, or that I'm taking, like, let's say I have a frustrating day writing, but I've never really had a frustrating day swimming, or like I've never had a frustrating run, like, or a frustrating day lifting weights. Like it's so much easier to win over here. And so if the hobby or the skill or the thing you're spending time on, it's just much more, the success in it is much more in your control. And so it's, I think, important to have that. Like, it would be good for the president, I'm not talking about any current president, but like it's good for a president to have some physical activity that they blow off steam doing, or, you know, that they have like quiet time to themselves. Like, we need to have that in our life. So don't just think like, oh, I'm figuring out this skill, so like now I'm learning finance, and now I'm learning this. Like, they don't have to be professional skills. They can be like, I learned how to knit. You know, like, it'd be totally impractical and of no real value, but it's the process of doing it that is the beneficial thing.
But the knitting or the swimming can also become frustrating if you're doing it at a professional level. If you're a professional knitter, then all of a sudden now you need to find, well, I need to write in my off time, because the burden of proof is not that high for those hobbies if you're not trying to do it professionally. Yeah,
like Chris Bosh, the basketball player, like one season he taught himself how to code, and another season he taught himself the guitar in the off season. So these are not in any way beneficial skills on the basketball court. But the point was, like, he's obviously training in the off season, but the point of the off season is to rest and to get some distance from the game and to like let the body recuperate. But that doesn't mean you let the mind atrophy. You know what I mean? So I think it's just key that you're finding things that are keeping you sharp. But ironically, in keeping you sharp, you're also finding rest.
And I think what you'll find sometimes, the things you thought excited you or interested you, they may not actually interest you once you dive into it.
Yes.
We often confuse excitement for passion, but you get excited about an idea. I really want to write this book, but then when the work actually comes down to it, it's like, maybe I'm not actually excited about it.
That's true. And also, though, like, you don't have to get good at it. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can also just do it.
Right.
You know, like so I run, and I ran in middle school and high school, and I hated it, and then I sort of rediscovered it after college, or in college, and so I run almost every day. I ran this morning. And so because people know I run, they go, oh, do you do marathons? Do you want to do this race? I'm like, I'm not trying to get really good at it. Yeah. Like, I'm just doing it. Like, I'm pretty naturally good at it, and I do push myself, but like, I don't need to turn this into a competition. Like, I have a lot of competition in my life, and I have a lot of things that I'm trying to like be world class at. I don't need to be world class at my hobby.
Right. And I think that quite often that can taint the hobby as well. If you're if you're just trying to if you're trying to
turn it into a job.
Yeah. Well, Alex, I'm going to send you a copy of Stillness is the Key. I hope you get some value from that. And our next question is from Carrie in Anaheim, California.
Hi, Josh and Ryan. My name is Carrie, and I'm 20, and I'm a film student who's cultivating a passion for television writing that I plan on turning into a mission when I graduate. This semester, I have an internship that I absolutely love at a company that I really enjoy working for. However, the commute is awful. I'm commuting from Anaheim to Beverly Hills twice a week. Last week, I spent 10 hours in the car on top of the full work days, which are for credit only. They're not paid. I usually listen to music or this podcast during the drive, but I keep finding myself really tired and frustrated by the long hours in the car. Do you have any advice on ways to make my commute more pleasant or more manageable without having to quit an internship that I get a lot of value from?
So Ryan, the word that comes to mind for me is peace. Yeah, how can she make her commute more peaceful in a way?
Yeah,
and that is a recurring theme throughout Stillness is the Key. You're talking about stillness. It's sort of finding that inner peace. And by the way, I think we have more discrete bits of input than ever before.
Sure.
You write about how the Stoics had this problem where it's like, put away your books and go live life,
yeah.
right? But also now now we yearn for the books because we're bombarded with social media, we're bombarded with the glowing screens, we're bombarded with just the information, the cascade of information, and she's looking for peace. And it seems a bit quixotic to me to try to find peace by like, well, I'm going to use this commute to, listen to more, find more, search more. How does she find peace?
I think you can argue it either way. I mean, the irony is like she's 20. So when she's 30, let's say she achieves all the dreams that she wants. She has this awesome career. Or maybe she's 40 and she has a family. She's going to look back and be like, I can't believe I used to get 10 hours in the car by myself. Do you know what I mean? That was so wonderful.
Reframing it.
You know? So it's like, don't necessarily see this as this like huge inconvenience, but try to see it with it's like how we go, like we look back in our own lives when we see these like difficult periods we went through, but we're grateful for them. It would be wonderful if we could give ourselves I'm not saying you can magically turn unpleasant things into pleasant things, but if we are going to appreciate them a little bit more in the future, can't we give ourselves like even 10% of that now? Yeah. So just going like, I have this time and I'm not going to feel angry about it. I'm not going to try to rush through it. I'm just going to be like, this is it. You know, I think that's one way to start it. Although I got this advice from Robert Greene when I was about that age. I was his research assistant. I had an internship for someone sort of just like she had, and lots of, long commutes. It was in Los Angeles, and he just sort of gave me this advice. He's like, there's two times of time. He said there's alive time and dead time. And dead time is like you're in the car and you're like, I have an hour to kill, right? Alive time is like, I have an hour. How am I going to use this hour? You know? Or it's like, hey, I have 3 months left on this internship. I don't really like it. I want to do something else. Like, am I going to quit? Am I going to complain? Am I going to phone it in? Or I'm going to be like, how can I use these 3 months to some positive end? And so I like that she's listening to a podcast or she's listening to music, but you could also say like, this is how many people would kill for an hour to meditate, And like, I'm going to find this time to just have 1 hour quiet for myself. Like, how can she use this time? I have a commute some days, and so it's like, that's when I make my phone calls.
Yeah.
Like, that's when I call my parents. That's when I catch up with people I haven't talked to in a long time. That's when I just think about stuff that I'm working on. So it's this hour doesn't have to be wasted, and you don't have to find a way to like rush through it. You can go like, how can I use this to my advantage? How can I like really be present for it and get a lot out of it? And I think peace ensues from that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm thinking about now the reframing. I was in the corporate world in a previous life. I managed 150 retail stores. Which I know is really ironic with the whole minimalism thing, but yes. I think that led me to this. And Nicodemus and I worked at the same telecom company, and I had a lot of commuting because I lived in Dayton, I worked in Cincinnati, and so like I was driving back and forth, and I probably spent, I don't know, 10 to 15 hours a week in the car, sometimes more than that. And at the time, I begrudged the fact that I had to have so much of a commute, but I also realized that it was actually, I'm an extreme introvert.
Yeah.
It was the only time in my life that I had alone.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was great for me in retrospect. And now anytime I go back to Ohio, it's like I have the most pleasant memories of driving. Yes. Whereas before, it's because I assigned some sort of negative connotation to it. And I think it is quite often as easy as appreciating what is good from this commute. Yeah, maybe it does suck to drive from Anaheim to Beverly Hills every day, but maybe it's also awesome. You have the opportunity to have that alone time there every single day.
Yeah, and look, like we know, like, okay, you make $100, you have to pay a certain amount of that in taxes, right? Like we know there's tax associated with all good things, right?
Yes.
You make money, you pay taxes. one of the things the Stoics talk about is just like paying the taxes of life willingly and gladly almost, right? So instead of being like, oh, it's April 15th, I can't believe I have to write this huge check to the government, we should be like, no, this is what I have to pay to get what I got, right? And every year I post this on social media and people get very mad. It's all these like crazy, ridiculous trolls. But it's just like, look, you have a life-changing internship that you get fulfillment out of that's like getting you closer to where you want to go. The hour drive is a tax.
Yeah.
Like nothing is free.
Yeah.
Like even though you're working for free, nothing is free. And so if you just go, this is the tax, right? Like arguments are the tax of being married, like phone calls are the tax of work, or whatever, right? There's just taxes associated with all the stuff that we have to do. And most taxes are progressive. So the more stuff that you get or do, the more taxes that come along with it.
Yeah, and I guess any of those taxes are things that may not be pleasant in the moment, but I like that idea of reframing. Even it's April 15th, I'm going to write this check. I could find a way to make it more pleasant than it is, even if it isn't truly pleasant to me.
Or can you just get to neutral? Like, why don't we just start by like, I'm going to get to neutral. Like, I'm just not going to be resentful, right, of the fact that I have to pay taxes, because taxes are a part of life, and that's what I'm doing. I'm not saying you pay more tax than you have to, right? You're not like, oh, I'm gonna round up here, or whatever. You get an accountant, you try to minimize the taxes you don't need to pay, but then when they're like, look, here's the bill, you write the check.
Yes, indeed. Carrie, I'm going to send you a copy of our book, Essential. There's 150 essays in there about what it means to live an intentional life. It's 12 different areas, and one of those areas is mindfulness. And so as you're on the road and you're looking to be a bit more mindful with your time, I think there are some tips, some strategies in our book, Essential. If you like our podcast, you'll like the audiobook version of that. It's over 6 hours long. Or if you want the book or the ebook version, we're happy to send those to you as well.
That's a whole week of commuting almost.
That's right.
So you get through the whole audiobook.
Or at least just listen to the mindfulness chapter and then maybe turn it off after that. Let's move on to our lightning round. Now, Ryan, this is where we typically answer questions from social media. We're at The Minimalists on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You're at Ryan Holiday on all the relevant social media networks. Also, ryanholiday.net, I believe, is your website.
Yeah, there's another Ryan Holiday. He's like a Christian musician or something. he got it before I did.
So we had Sam Harris on here, and I guess there's a musician who's Sam Harris who has all the handles, and it's like, I can only imagine how frustrating that must be.
I have my email is ryan.holiday@gmail. It's just like I got it when I was in high school, and that's the thing. And I was like, who's this guy that has like Ryan Holiday at Gmail? Like, how did he beat me to this? It took me like 8 years to realize that I have that. That the dot doesn't mean anything.
And that's true. You can put dots between every letter, it doesn't matter. It'll still make its way to you.
Yes.
Maybe bleep out his email address.
No, I don't care. I post it every day.
Okay, good luck.
I'll just ignore it if I don't want to reply.
Well, anyway, during the lightning round, this is what we do. We try to answer every question with just a short, shareable, less than 140 character response.
Okay.
We put the text to these minimal maxims, we call them. They're like little aphorisms, truisms, whatever. We put them in the show notes. And if you don't have anything pithy, it's okay. Sean, we can just maunder on a bit. Sean tweezes it out, puts it in the show notes, and makes it look really pretty.
The characters as I
I think we're good. Also, we collect them all in one place now, minimalmaxims.com. Our first question is from Lady Liza. She says, it seems like the world is constantly sending messages to never slow down and keep going no matter the cost. How does one combat these messages? I have a pithy answer for you, so you tell me what you think about this, Ryan. My pithy tweetable answer is, moving slowly down the right path will get you there quicker than sprinting behind the herds racing in the wrong direction.
Yeah, there's a Latin expression, I think it's festina lente, and it just means make haste slowly. Measure twice, cut once. I think we think like, oh, I've got to like pull an all-nighter, or I've got to rush through this, or I've got to, get it out fast. And then what we have trouble calculating is like the costs of having to go back and do it or fix it. And that's certainly true in my own life. I'm always someone who sort of speeds through things, and then it's like the problems that this creates usually net out to just having done it right the first time.
I think busyness has become the sort of status symbol of success, and
Sure.
in fact we just mistake it for success, because I used to always say I'm busy. When I was in the corporate world, I was working 80 hours a week, worked 362 days a year, and how's it going? Oh, just real busy.
Yeah.
But really what I was saying is my life's out of control.
Sure. No, for me, success is like how empty my calendar is, because it means I'm doing shit that I want to do.
That is pithy. I really like that. All right, next question's from Paolo. How do you balance your work life with your family life when you're trying to build a meaningful business and have to work really hard? Now, Ryan, you have a kid. Is he two yet?
I have 2 kids.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And an 8-week-old also.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And yet you're out here.
I am.
On the book grind, and this is part of the tax you have to pay for writing a book. Is we often mistake as creatives, like, I wrote the book and now I'm done, and you're halfway done now.
Yeah. I would try to tell myself is what you get to do, but you do have to do it, right? Because like if you don't market it, you don't get to do another one, right? There's no audience, right? So it is a balance. I once asked this NFL coach, I was like, you guys work these like insane hours, but you have a family, you have kids, like how do you do it? And he was like, you have to find the moments inside the moments. And what he meant by that is like, so from the outside, you think like, oh, like this coach, he works for, like, shows up at the facility at like 5 a.m. He works out, and then he doesn't leave until like 10 or whatever, right?
Right.
And then you realize it's like, oh, okay, actually, like he shows up at 5, but that's where he works out. Like the gym is at the office, right? So a normal person leaves at the same time, but they go to the gym, right? Like, so that they're they've built a facility that allows them to do everything in one spot. But then also there's like families there all the time. It's like integrated inside the thing. So they might be at the office from here to here, but they have a much more sort of inclusive, like immersive experience. Do you know what I mean? It's not like they're not gone for 14 hours and they show up to this house full of strangers. And that's something I've tried to cultivate in my life, where it's like, I'm working from home, so I'm upstairs, but I'm coming downstairs to get something to drink, and I'm spending 15 minutes with my kid. Like, so there are downsides to sort of switching between tasks, and we know like what studies show about this. But it's about finding. So you're working hard and you're really dedicated to what you're doing, but I think you want to try to not be absentee. Like not be gone. You want to integrate these things.
Yeah, I like that, as opposed to trying to balance, all the spinning plates, where you're, to mix my metaphors here, you're integrating instead of balancing quite often. And I think if you find ways to do that, at least in my life, it's been a lot more pleasant to I don't believe in work-life balance so much as I believe in work-life integration where possible. Now, also realizing that, maybe whether it's Paolo or it's someone working in a cubicle somewhere, you don't always have that opportunity.
Sure.
You might be in a season of your life where it does require balance.
Yeah. I mean, look, there was a period for a chunk of my 20s where I was very much out of balance, right? Because you had to be to sort of make your bones and to get to a position where you had more autonomy. But
These
also
are the American Apparel days.
Yeah, and I worked not far from here at a talent agency in Hollywood for a while, and I was a research assistant for a writer. I just did like a bunch of stuff all at the same time. But that I didn't also have a family. Like the idea was like, this is that period. I'm going to do all the things now. But it's also being like people. It's also knowing that you better be working towards autonomy, or you can get sort of trapped. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I find that we mistake this idea of job security. I think job security is the least secure thing, because at any moment, like the telecom that I worked for was eventually bought by another telecom. They closed all the stores that I was no longer there anymore. Yeah. But had I been there in my nice secure job, everyone, I can't believe you're leaving the healthcare and the security. No, I've been laid off just like everyone else, right? Sure. And so it's almost a misnomer when we talk about security. The most secure thing is finding that autonomy that you're. I mean, it sounds like Paolo was actually working toward that. He's building his own business. The pithy answer I will give you, Paolo, is hard work isn't the same thing as meaningful work.
Yeah.
Because I think quite often we confuse the two. If I'm working hard, and I mean, yeah, you can run around in circles. My daughter does this until she gets dizzy. I mean, there's nothing meaningful about that, but she feels like she's doing something productive because she's running around in circles.
But I think your point about integration versus balance, it's like, okay, let's say it's some morning and I've got a 12 p.m. flight and I've also got to exercise. It's like, oh, I'm going to put my son in the stroller and run with him. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, now I've taken two things I have to do and combined them together, and they're enjoyable, and it's integrated in that way.
I find that parenting doesn't often feels less than meaningful. And what I mean by that is part of parenting isn't like trying to be dad of the year every moment. It is simply showing up and being present with the kid. And I mean, I only have one kid, and I don't always find that as meaningful as like, I'm going to sit down and be productive. I'm going to write 2,000 words today or whatever. Like to me, there's like some product of that. The product of parenting is also there, but it seems far more nebulous in the moment.
Well, there's this interview I read with Jerry Seinfeld once, and he's like, parents are always talking about having quality time with their kids, and he's like, I don't know what that means. He's like, I like garbage time with my kids. He's like, eating cereal at like 11 p.m. when you should be in bed, or you know what I mean? Like this idea that like parenting or family time has to be this like special stuff. Like actually this is a lot of pressure on like long distance relationships. You're like, we didn't see each other on the week during the week, now we're here on the weekend, we have to do something big, and it's like you don't have to do anything,
right? And
in fact that might actually be putting additional, like you're out of step with each other, and now you're trying to do this complicated dance where you're cramming in a trip on the weekend, or going out or seeing people, and it's like you could have just stayed at home on the couch and you would have had much more meaningful of an interaction. So that, I think that's the other thing with kids is like, it's like, oh, I've been gone and now I'm home, and so it's like I have to make up for this, and it's like, no, you just have to sit there while they play with trains on the floor.
Yeah,
like that's parenting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find one of the most meaningful things we do almost every night is we as a family, my wife and I and our 6-year-old daughter, we'll just walk around the block once.
Yes.
And it's ritualized, so we do it most nights, and I find that is far more meaningful than like, oh, we have to try to do the trampoline park, and we have to. Those things are fun, and there's a time for those. But if you work that into every day, if that was your daily expectation, you continue to up the threshold, and at some point, we're like bungee jumping every evening in order to just to have fun.
And also like garbage time is pretty much free. You know what I mean? Like your walk is free.
Right.
You know, like, so people are like, oh, like privilege, but like the best things like don't cost anything. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like the walk is the special thing. It's not, the walk probably has more of an impact on your kid than like over a long enough timeline than like sending them to an expensive private school or something, I would argue.
Yeah. And it's funny, like I will ask her about, hey, do you remember the time we did blank? And it's always like some amazing thing when she was 2 years old, and she had, No. Don't remember it at all. Yeah. But she remembers the sort of inconsequential, and I think that's how life is. You never, it's not always the big moments that you. In fact, in the book, you talk about lust being a bit of a problem, right? Because we want these peak experiences, whether it is an orgasm or winning the trophy for the race or whatever it is,
or wanderlust. Like I gotta go to Machu Picchu because I'll get a good Instagram photo, and then I'll have crossed that off my bucket list, and like all the cool people I know have been there.
Yeah. Well, Sean, I think you got some pithy stuff there to tweeze out, and it looks like we have a bunch more surprise questions this week. How do I find stillness in the middle of a crisis? How do I find peace in a toxic relationship to which I'm legally bound? How do I cut out the brain noise to stay focused on one project at a time? How do I find quiet living in chaotic urban surroundings? How can I find peace despite chronic pain? And many more of your questions. Also, we're going to talk about Napoleon's best email inbox tip. That was fun. Also, we're going to talk about some Stoic wisdom. We're going to talk about journaling, why I don't like journaling, and Ryan Holiday convinces me that maybe I should be journaling. How successful people recharge in their downtime. We're going to talk about silence. We're going to talk about Tiger Woods' dreaded E word. We're going to talk about confidence versus ego. And we're going to talk about the difference between leisure and escapism. And if you want to hear all that, you can listen to this week's Maximal episode, available exclusively on Patreon. That's right, you're currently listening to our weekly Minimal episode, but each week, actually, you know what? Let me skip the script this week, podcast, Sean. Let me just say this. Every week on Patreon, we do a long-form podcast. We call it a Maximal episode. We just finished recording this one with Ryan Holiday. I can tell you this, it's one of the most meaningful conversations that I've ever had. We answered a bunch more questions. We had a really great conversation about stillness, about stoicism, about all kinds of stuff, about silence being it's not necessarily the absence of all sound. We talked about how certain successful people recharge in their downtime. We had a really meaningful conversation. We talked about writing and tips for writing and creativity. Ryan Holiday and I just really hit it off on the Maximal episode. I would encourage you to listen to that. You can listen to it in your regular podcast app if you become a Patreon supporter. Also, we're capping our Patreon support at 6,000 people because we decided that's enough. So there are still some spots left if you do want to be part of the Minimalists private podcast. It's a separate long-form podcast every week where we really dive deep into your questions. We get kind of personal on that in ways that we don't talk about things in public. So if you're interested in that and you want to go a lot deeper with respect to minimalism or stoicism or stillness or the topics we tackle each week with our guests, then head on over to theminimalists.com/support. You can become a supporter there. I know it's just a couple dollars, but that goes really far. It allows us to keep this podcast 100% advertisement free. We think advertisements suck. We don't want to do them on our podcast. And so those of you who are our Patreon supporters, keep this podcast alive and keep it 100% advertisement free. Find all the details and all the good stuff over theminimalists.com/support. And now here are some voicemail comments and tips from our listeners.
Hello, Josh and Ryan. My name is Mandy Bender. I am calling from Lincoln, Nebraska. I'm calling today because I have a great solution for what to do with an old wedding dress, especially if it's kind of outdated and not likely to be worn again. The hospitals in my area have a wonderful program. They have volunteers who take old wedding dresses and make burial gowns for infants. I think this is a great way to honor these children, and I know it is something the families mourning the loss of a child will find value in.
Hi, this is Jessie Hazelwood in Austin, Texas, and I was listening to the podcast and a woman commented about what's next. I've decluttered and now what's next? And I think that I've experienced some of the anxiety that I heard in her voice about, okay, now what? And I think that I personally still feel the need to veg out and not work, but at the same time, I will go and check my email, and now that is a joy to me because I've cleaned it out, and the emails that I'm getting are telling me that I've got a new podcast, or it's my favorite shopping site. I really like fashion and researching fashion, and but I get to sit down and enjoy that and not worry about, oh, this isn't clean, my house is cluttered, and I need to get up and do something and have that extra layer of anxiety on top. And then also playing my guitar, when I'm playing it, I'm not worried about all the things that I need to do. I can actually sit down and enjoy doing the things that I want and finding joy in my life.
All right, y'all. Thanks again to Ryan Holiday for one of the most meaningful conversations I've had on this main podcast, also on our Patreon podcast. Man, we just talked about so much. I want to encourage you to check out his new book, Stillness is the Key. It's out this week. You can check it out wherever you get books. You can find him at Ryan Holiday on social media. RyanHoliday.net is his website. And also, he has a great book, but also a great website email list. It's The Daily Stoic. If you just go to dailystoic.com or follow at dailystoic on social media. You can find that there as well. He's creating something meaningful for the world, something I think you'll get a lot of value from. Check out Stillness is the Key, his latest book. And real quick, for right here, right now, here's one thing that's going on in the life of the Minimalists. Do you know about our side project? It's called minimalism.life. That's the website, minimalism.life. Over there, you can find free, beautiful, simple wallpapers for your phone or for your computer. You can find some beautiful journal articles. And there's also something over there called Inside Minimalism, where you get the best of minimalist design, minimalist travel, and minimalist well-being. We partnered up with Carl and Alberto from Minimalissimo and 5 Style to give you the best of all-around minimalism, minimalist design, travel, and well-being, all in one place. Head on over to minimalism.life if you want to learn more about that. You can also follow Minimalism Life on social media. If you're on Instagram, the most beautiful photos and quotes that you'll find over there, it's just at Minimalism Life on Instagram. Or if you're on Twitter, it's just at Minimalism on Twitter. If you have a comment, question, or minimalism tip for our podcast, leave us a voicemail, 406-219-7839, or send a voice memo to podcast@theminimalists.com. You can comment on this episode at youtube.com/theminimalists. If you want our show notes in your inbox, sign up for our email list over at theminimalists.com. You'll also receive our Simple Sunday emails every week. Just head on over to theminimalists.com. At the very top, there's no pop-up ad or anything like that. We don't do that crazy stuff, but you can just enter your email address there at the top. We'll never, ever send you spam, but we will send you our show notes and our Simple Sunday emails each week. Never any advertisements or anything like that. For our added value this week, I've been rediscovering my friend Andy Davis's music lately. He opened up for us when we were on tour in 2014 at our Nashville stop. And we've become friends since then. He's one of my favorite musicians in the world. And since we've been talking about chaos today, the sort of chaos of everyday life, let's listen to a song that's about just that. Here's a song called Solution to Run from one of my favorite musicians, Andy Davis. This is from his 2012 album, Heartbreak Yellow. And if you leave here today with just one message, we hope it's this: love people and use things, because the opposite never works. Thanks for listening, y'all. We'll see you next time.
The Minimalists.